Was it harder going from 0 to 1 or 1 to 2?
0 to 1 and 1 to 2 are hard for different reasons. In fact, adding a baby every time is hard for a different reason because there's always going to be complexity to it. But when you go from 0 to 1, you go from having no one that you need to care for in that like capacity of they need everything from you. And that's hard just because you realize for the first time you have no idea what you're doing. No matter how much you knew before, you don't know. Going from 1 to 2 is when you realize that now these are two totally different people with two totally different sets of needs at two totally different sets of development, and no one has a brain yet. You are thinking for the tiny human, and that feels like a lot. And that is why you get into the trenches. Later on in the video, she talks about how she just kind of feels like they're slowly coming up for air, like the baby's now 5 months old and you're starting to feel like that. And that's true. But that first year of life with any baby is difficult because just when you think that we're like sleeping well and eating well, all of a sudden a growth spurt happens or a tooth starts to come in or something else is going to happen where it's just so unpredictable that first year of what you're going to have the next day. There's such rapid growth in them. There's a lot of enjoyable things, but the unpredictability of that first year makes it really difficult. So when you couple that on top of other children, that is why you feel like you're in the trenches every time that you add a new baby. Now, it does get easier the more that you have, but it does not actually get easier. It just becomes a pattern recognition. You start to be able to recognize the pattern of what's going to happen next, and so you can kind of prepare for the next insane thing that's going to pop up. But I'm going to tell you, 2 is the hardest. 2 is the hardest for me. 2 is the hardest for the majority of moms out there. 3 is also hard. That 1, 2, and 3 children is really, really difficult because you're still trying to figure out what you look like as a mom alongside seeing what your children are like. And that is a very complex thing to be growing next to each other. And I think that's why a lot of moms who have 4 or more tend to do a little bit better because we've started to understand who we are as mothers and our reactions become a little bit more automatic. So we know what is actually a problem and what's not as much of a problem. And you just lack that experience in those first few. And since it's such a high risk thing in raising a younger human, that everything feels so much more intense with number 1, 2, and 3. And some moms may find it way easier. Some moms may find it way harder. I'm just talking about the general consensus of moms that I talk to now who have raised a certain amount of children. It seems like there gets to be a point that you start to be able to trust yourself. And when that trusting yourself sets in, motherhood is a little bit more enjoyable. So if you're in the trenches, just know that there's going to come a point that you're going to feel like you can trust yourself. Now, there's moments that you're like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? I'm failing at everything. Everything is falling apart. The wheels are falling off. I don't know what I'm doing. It's a whole thing. But there are also moments that you're like, and everything's all right with the world. Everything is all right with the world. Sometimes that's when they're all sleeping and you're about to go to sleep and they're just sleeping through the night and everything. That's when you're like, and all is right with the world. But sometimes it's also chaotic. So give yourself grace. Give yourself grace because motherhood is hard.